dry may not affect the operation of the thing. It still puts a load on whatever you're tuning, so that's always a must for me. And even in the BC 221, the frequency meter, that's got quite an extensive gear train in it too, and I keep them well lubricated. And the grease I use, I checked it when I was at work by taking two little scoops out from the tin and putting them on the top of a 6080 triode, which was used in voltage regulating, and they were very hot. And I thought, well, if it'll stand that, it'll stand anything. And at the end of the day, believe it or not, the grease was still sitting there, quite untouched and quite unmoved. But if I used any other form of grease, it would have melted quite clearly and ran down, and might have damaged the rest of the equipment or done something undesirable. So that was for me. And the type of grease I use is a non-run grease, which is not supposed to run under any conditions, and I think it's X-Oil made by Valvoline. I've always used that, and that's been very effective. We used to have a contract with Valvoline when I was at work, and used to buy our oil and grease and everything in bulk, and quite effective too. They used to take it around, take it and deliver it, and no sweat at all. Here's flashing lamp at the rear. Yes, I can imagine the consternation that would cause, and we hope there's been no further trouble to the rig, because you can lose the front end transistor very easily, as I've found on 2 occasions with this 101, having it out on not exactly mobile, but a fixed portable location, and some kids were nearby with these handheld walkie-talkies. I don't think they even had to have a license for them or anything, and they were right underneath the antenna, believe it or not, shouting at one another. And of course, what happened? Put on the FD101, no sound at all coming from the speaker, so that worried me until I found out the cause. Put a new transistor in, which fortunately is plug-in, and away it went again. So that's a lesson to be learned. Another time, I think it failed when I was out on my birthday, of course, and my brother-in-law and his wife were down, and we went to some place for dinner, which was quite understandable. I came back the next morning, switched on for the morning net, and again the same trouble. No audio at all from the speaker, so a bit of an investigation, and plug in a new transistor, which I always carry with me, and away it went again. So that again was due, I think, on that night. Must have just got in the front of the rig and perished the first RF, which was a 3SK40, and that went. So always now, best before switching off, I always switch in the RF attenuator, which puts a couple of resistors across and prevents a static build-up, and that's worked ever since. Yes, the FD101, I've had trouble, not trouble so much, but plugging in this little relay, this little changeover relay, and I found that the socket was unusual in that it had 4 pins down one side and 4 pins down the other, like only one side of the relay is used, and it's very, very awkward to get in. So much, in fact, I had to remove a small capacitor, which is a ceramic, disc ceramic, and that's just got in the way, so I took that out, and I thought, well, I've got that out, I'll examine the soldering and that on it, and I repaired the soldering and put some sleeving over it, and that was right. But when that was out, the relay was much easier to pull out and get going. So we'll have to be very careful of that one. I don't know if it'll do any harm if it will put in the other way, but I'm quite sure you could get that relay pushed in around the wrong way. And the relay wouldn't operate, of course, because the connection to the coil would have gone. I don't know what would happen. I'm not game to try it. So I believe that till next time. But there's nothing wrong with the relay, and in fact I examined the relay I took out and it was quite good. There was no fitting or anything of the contact, so it's only a changeover relay, and it's probably one of the first relays to come on when you switch to transmit. The relay would be the first to come on, so I guess it gets rid of a lot of trouble we've had. I'll go through the notes. Yes, it's rather difficult you've got to use two fingers and very, very carefully put the relay in position. But when you've got the little indication on it, it makes it much easier. And you can pull the relay out very easily, put it on the bench and say, and which way does that go? Then you're in trouble. Probably the relay is quite all right. If it was put down the wrong way, nothing would happen and it'd just stay on receive mode or something like that. And okay, Brian, too, about that grease you mentioned, the low run grease, and for the photocopy machine, yes, you'd have to be very careful there too, because if it's a silicon grease or something like that, it's probably quite okay, because that doesn't get affected by heat too much. But any other form of grease that's not the right one, you would have to worry about what was happening. Oh yes, switch grease important, yes, that's right. And okay about Wasco last night too, and being still on VHF, yes, well, a little bit of trouble with the Morse and a little working on the Morse, and I think he'll get there. I think he said he's going for his license, Morse license, in a few weeks' time. And okay about that 20-metre Russian station you contacted. Yes, I used to work there myself. In fact, one chap there, he had a UA call or something like that, and had quite a good contact with him. But haven't gone very much on the DX lately. And okay about glass of water too. Yes, that's a good sign. There's one thing about my brother-in-law, he doesn't imbibe, and it's the glass of water is quite refreshing. There's no doubt about it, and that's how it should be. Although I'm not teetotal myself, I don't indulge very, very deeply in it. Right, well, that's all I've got for this over. It's been quite long, so I'll put it over to Herb now and find out what Herb's been doing in the meantime. So VK3JO to transmit, with the group listening VK3AP.
Oh, VK3JO replying. Yes, all okay from both there. Thanks very much. All very interesting. And let's see, where do we go? Firstly, get rid of these papers and see what I've written down, what notes I've been making. And where are we? Oh, Brian, you followed me. Right, here, QRM chirp there, and still on the go. And I'm interested about that no-run grease talking of. Afraid I haven't used that at all, but I notice you can get it in a small tube, so I have to keep my eye open and see if I can see it about sometime. Yes, so the daytime QSOs there, 80 metres and so on, and your friend was listening in to those also. Okay, about the mod tranny there for Frank, right? Well, apparently he'll be using the one that he's got there, and well, no, anyway, if next time you speak to him, you can get all the details there, but that was his concern. Yes, noticed the BC348. Well, I've never had anything to do with them, but they do seem to have a great similarity between this AR7 and also the HRO. Glad to know that Roscoe's HRO is going okay there, so that's good. Yes, we'll persist with this, and then I still intend to take up Joe's offer to have it checked out with the instrument, the Unilab there sometime. But I guess that'll be a week or two down the line as yet. Okay, about Bill's net. I must get onto that sometime, but I don't know, these days with daylight saving time, and particularly this cold, or rather not cold, dry weather, and so on, I've usually use the evenings to do a bit of watering and so on, so by the time I get that done, it's getting a bit late in the night. So anyway, I'll pop in there sometime. Single LMR, interesting about the contact there at Roscoe's place with the 80 metres and then 20 metres, and that European station, or was it an Asiatic station? I'm not sure of it. And yes, I find any of those that I hear, it's very difficult to identify the call sign. You've got to listen to it several times. They seem to have a different way of speaking, and even though they might be using English, it's a bit difficult to always hear exactly what they're talking about, or I found that anyhow. So it's interesting to know you're able to make the contact, and with that, just the radiating element of a tri-band, yes, tri-band beam, without its reflector and directors. So should get improved results when he can get those going. But he's got the incentive to stick with the Morse code now and get a full call, hasn't he? So have to get stuck into that. Wonder is he listening? He could switch on 2 meters and I'd find out straight away. Anyhow, what else have we got? Oh, and getting on to 160. Yes, well, he's got a well-established 160 metre vertical there, so that'll be going great. And note the booze bus, and also no worries. Yes, well, much the same applies to me too. I don't include alcohol as a regular part of. In fact, it's a most irregular part of the fluid intake. Right. Al, yes, note your comments there about that broadcast set and the VIM coming through on the IF channels, which reminds me that with the AO7 we have to connect this SIG-gen onto the grid circuit of the converter stage, disconnecting its normal lead. I've got a capacitor there in the circuit, and the grid is returned to ground with a resistor. So that's the means of injecting the IF frequency 455 kc signal into the set to do all that aligning. And then, having done that, and you want to check the operation of the crystal filter and adjust its output coil, the instructions say to reconnect that and tune into a broadcast station, preferably one with music. I'm afraid I don't do that. I just twiddle the dial until I pick one up anyway. So that's what happened. You want it at low level, so that's the easiest way. I think it was 3 AK I think that I got on there, so that did the job just as well. So I haven't disconnected the signal generator, just switch it off and tune in that. want a low level anyway, so that it's not going to give you a high AVC voltage there to upset the tuning on the IF stages. Right. So anyway, also now what have we got there? Oh, about Henry there, and there's FT101. Yes, there would be in trouble connecting the coax there to the two sets rather than to an aerial. I was wondering if it didn't do more damage. Interesting about your greasing comments too there, Al, and the grease and test for heat. Yes, right, good enough. The 101 fault, not sure exactly. Attenuator, the relay and the 4 pins there. Yes, well, I was looking at the circuit there, and I've got it in front of me. I had it here when I was thinking of Frank's problem with the FT101, just to have a good look at the circuit. And of course that that fuse lamp is just between the receive contact of the relay and the receiver, so that in his case, if that lamp was flickering as he spoke, if that lamp was flickering, it would mean, of course, that the RF was hopping over from the contacts, from the main contact there to the receive contact. It must have been arcing over there to cause that lamp to glow. That's what I would expect anyway. So that's what I thought there was. There's a problem perhaps in the tuning unit that's causing that arcing over. Anyhow, but what I was noticing there, looking at the circuit in the box, that the diagram for the relay is shown with the dotted rectangle around it, which I presume is the box arrangement. But there's 5 connections there, 3 of them for the relay and 2 for the coil. So looks as though there's 5 contacts on the thing. One of them might be common. I'm not sure on that, but I wouldn't think so. So anyway, so it just made me wonder about this possibility of getting the thing in the wrong way. That's quite serious, isn't it? If I do pull mine out, and note you have to remove a disc ceramic to be able to get a grip on the thing to pull it out. Now, I haven't really located its exact position there as yet, so I'll have to do that, and because I may have a similar problem having a similar set. Yes, right. Well, I don't know that I've got much else to contribute in the radio line. About the only other thing I've got in mind is that last night, I'm quite sure the best way to put this. Last night, my neighbour's daughter came in to let me know that her mother, who has over the last 12 months been battling breast cancer, has now been diagnosed with it in the liver. So, of course, that's rather a sad situation, and nothing much can be done. Okay, so that's not the best way to wind up the week's transmissions, I'm afraid, but unfortunately there we are. Today being Friday, don't normally come on tomorrow. I was just thinking, Brian, you were off to the EMDRC to get squashed in the opening rush. I wonder if they do have a transmission of the WIA broadcast at these White Elephant sales. Perhaps I should record the WI broadcast and you'd be able to hear it. So I'll better say cheers, all the best there. Should be on. I've got Joe scared tomorrow morning. I'm sure he'll be a bit devastated about the news too. Through him that I got to, through my neighbour that I got to know, Joe. Because the neighbour used to work at the same establishment, the Melbourne University. Anyway, that's tomorrow morning. But apart from that, probably the Sunday morning usual scared. So cheers all have a nice day, all have a nice weekend. See you all further down the log. I'll listen through for final comments. VK3JO concluding and standing by. Cheers all.
Yes, fine there, Herb and Al. Just got 9 o'clock, and I was about to say it's midday, we'll pass it over to Jack, but no can do. I don't know if Jack took a receiver with him at all into the hospital. So anyway, if you happen to be listening on some device there, Jack, hope you're well, as can be expected in the circumstances there. And that being the case, I won't put it over to VK3EB. Yes, good there, Al and Herb. Al, while you were talking there, I rushed out to the garage and actually got this tube of that grease I was talking about. It's made in the USA, ball and roller bearing lubricant. And it's made by a company called the Non-Fluid Oil Corporation. So that's the name of the company there. But they're specially designed for ball and roller bearings, high and low temperature use. So it also covers gear, of course, where you might be in the Arctic type of climate, where you'd get the reverse problem there with the oil just thickening up, or the grease just thickening up. So that's what this is, and it's not the normal sort of a grease colour. It's more like a Vaseline colour to look at, but certainly is effective there. So that's what I use in those tricky situations. I couldn't afford to use it for the motor car chassis lubrication there, Al. It would be a bit expensive there. So I'll stick to the molybdenum disulfide type chassis grease there in the grease gun. Do my own servicing here on the Ford, which is quite easy, being a fairly basic sort of car. So got a few grease nipples and whatnot on that particular vehicle. Your later cars, of course, you don't have much in the way of that nowadays. Most of the units are either sealed and pre-packed or using the polyurethane type bushes there. And let me see, Herb, yes, sorry to hear about the neighbour's relation there. And yes, I was aware that there was a link up there with Joe, friends or whatever. So as you say, yes, he'll be a bit upset about that, Herb, of course. But anyway, it only goes to reinforce my philosophy here. Make the most of each day. You never know when it's going to be the last one, do you? So I think that's, if possible, in circumstances that relate to all people that are different, of course. But I really believe if you can make the most of each day there, it's not a bad approach. Let's see, yes, one news item, which I noticed on the telly last night. We've now got a radio telescope in orbit. I think it's the first one, launched in Japan, I think it was, just the other day. And that's going to operate, of course, with the data coming from it in conjunction with all the land-based radio telescopes, of which Australia, plays part of a leading role there, with their various scopes there up at Tidbinbilla and the other areas. So it was quite interesting to see that particular article on TV there. Okay, I'll say cheers to all. No other news from here, I don't think, and I don't think there's any other points missed. just having a look at what I jotted down here. No, that's the lot. And as I say, still got the interference problem here. So I'm hoping that's being attended to. If not, there will be definite follow-up action taken. Cheers all, and I'll pass it round to you there, Al. I'll make this a final, and I'll listen out for both of you. VK3AP and the group VK3WYN.
Yes, thanks, Brian. All okay. It's a bit silly giving signal strength reports at such a short distance, but you're still the usual plus 60 Herb, and Brian, you're plus 48, so that's very good. And about all I can say now is okay, Herb, about alignment of the AR7. Yes, I don't know the AR7 all that well. I used to service a lot of them when I was in the Victoria Barracks, just down in St Kilda Road, and most of the trouble was that they have a crystal filter on board, which you are quite aware of, and somehow this little switch would get knocked, or some little switch they had on it to switch it in, and it would stay in, and of course it would muck up the broadcast band and everything, as you got this very, very narrow band of reception, and it was almost unbearable to listen to. And I used to have to go in and, with magic touch, you know, I didn't say anything about the crystal. I just quietly removed the crystal, and everything had come back to normal, and everyone was quite happy. And okay, about talk about a fuse lamp. Yes, you'll find quite a little bit of research necessary there to get a fuse lamp that is satisfactory. And you've got to be very careful of these new filaments they have in lamps now, which are coiled coil. You can have many turns of wire, which might slightly restrict the signal. I don't know. I've never found any reason to disbelieve it, but I think the fuse I've got in now, I can't remember what it is, but I think it's just a little piece of a fuse. I've one of these little push-in fuses, the cap's on the end, and I think it's just a little straight piece of wire, and that's all I use. And put aerolite it into a base, that's right, a whole tube of lamp base, and just plug in and plug out. I've got quite a few of them here, but all different. I was going to say form of heating element, but perhaps that's not right. There are all sorts of filaments used, but I don't think it's important. I don't think it matters much what you put in, as long as ones will blow easily. That's the main source of the problem they have. And okay about that grease of yours too, Brian. Yes, that sounds very interesting. And silicon grease, it shouldn't cause any trouble, no corrosion or anything like that. And we used to use that grease like that in the TV industry. Used to smear the alcohol cap and everything like that with it to prevent this arco, because sets used to do that in those days. You'd hear this violent crack going on behind there, and oh, something's going wrong here, and there's only the alcohol cap arcing over or something to the graphite coating on the outside of the tube. But the stuff we used to use was Gensil, G-N-S-I-L, Gensil 21A, and it's supposed to be very good for car ignition or anything. So that was what we used. And they warn you here, never smear contact surfaces with Gensil, as it possibly inhibits the passage of electricity. Yes, well, you've got to make sure you keep it off contacts of relay contacts and everything like that. And okay about the telescope in orbit. I think you said it was orbited by Japan. Well, I think they'll be quite capable of doing that. And nice to know, anyway, that somebody is watching the outer perimeter. apparently you get a much better viewing area above the surface of the Earth, about 200 or so miles, and you're well out in the clear. And it's amazing how what you can see when you're up there. Not that I'm planning to go up, of course. Right, well, I think that's all I've got now, so I'll say 73 and cheers to everybody. I think I've covered everything. Yeah. Oh, and sorry to hear about the news about the neighbour too, Herb. There's nothing much you can do about that. I only hope that they have the matter in hand, and the medical profession, and that they'll effect a cure. But it's very distressing, there's no doubt about that. Right, well, that's all I've got now, so I'll say 73 and cheers to you all, and see you all again. And we hope Jackie B will be quite safe and secure wherever he is, and we hope to hear him again tomorrow morning. Oh, not tomorrow morning, Monday morning. So we'll say 73S to you all, and see you again. VK3AP is now signing clear with the group and saying cheers. Cheers, everyone.
Yes, just acknowledged received all there, and thanks very much for everything there. Don't think I've got anything further to contribute, so I'll say cheers and all the best, and catch up with you again later on. Should be on Sunday morning as usual. VK3JO is concluding and closing.
Herb, something I forgot to reply to about the WIA broadcast on the same day as the EMDRC sale. They rebroadcast in the evening, don't they, Herb, on 80 metres over?
Yes, thanks for reminding me about that. I'd forgotten all about it, but that has been occurring, so you should be right.
Yes, I'll catch up with the broadcast then. I like to hear that either in the morning or the evening. So yeah, that's quite handy having the evening rebroadcast there. But thanks very much for that offer there for the tape recording. So at any rate, we'll probably be right on 80 metres there. I think they usually have at these the last EMDRC get together. I'm pretty sure they had a 2 metre station working there, and that's right. Yeah, they've got it on the brochure. Which if I had the light switched on here, Herb, I'd be able to read it. You'll see it on the flyer. They've got a talk-in frequency there on 2 metres, I think it is. Okay, there. Cheers all, and Al, if you're still listening, you can book your tickets over in the States there for flights to the moon and elsewhere. So I'll leave that thought with us all. VK3WYN clear.
Okay, thanks, Brian. I must bear that in mind. So VK3AP is once more off and clear.
With no doubt more to follow. At the moment I'm sitting on 400 milliamps and a field strength reading of about full scale now. It's dancing around a bit. I've been fiddling with the forest phone and the connections and one thing or the other. I don't know whether I might have a faulty connection in the coaxial cables. Anyhow, that remains to be seen. But I don't see why the output should range between 400 and 800 milliamps. I'm about 750 at the moment. Anyhow, keep going while the going is good. Good morning, Brian, and good morning, Herb. It's going to get warm, about 30, I think. I went round the block fairly early, just so that I didn't get cooked when I went round. I've got watering to do, which I haven't done. Get tired of the watering. What we need is a good half-inch of rain to water the garden for me. I was contemplating a bit more clean up here, but I've got down. I haven't done that far. It's within Kui, so I'll have to persevere. I've got rid of a bit of apparatus from the bench here. Bit of a spot where my logbook goes. And on the left of the logbook, I've got a great heap of stuff there. There's wires everywhere. And I don't know what they all are, but I'll have to sort them out. So that's the idea
between them and their decision on it. A female rower who escaped unhurt after a shark attack in Sydney. She thought she was lose her leg.
I'll have to head up for a haircut today. It's getting a bit long, and I'm going to the podiatrist
took a huge bite out of her boat and tossed her in the water.
And 1 in 34 is only 0.2 of a volt, so whilst it's a 50 ohm micro ohm meter, it's got a 25k pot in series with it, so I think that I'll probably put in 1 in 34s, the germanium diodes, and they won't require so much current to activate it. So we'll see how we go. We're fitting well. This is the Wireless Institute news yesterday. Didn't think of it till about 5 minutes before time. So I switched on and got the last 5 minutes, but of course I'd missed all the meat in the sandwich, so if there was anything important, I didn't hear it. I should get the AR magazine today too. Jerry got his, I think, last Friday. I reckon and you've probably got yours, Brian. I think I should get mine today, hopefully, anyhow. That doesn't always apply, of course. Doesn't always apply, but hopefully it'll come today. Okay, that'll do for the start. So I'll put it over to you, Brian, a VK3WYN and the group, with a pause, a VK3B.
Nothing heard in the pause. VK3 Echo Bravo and the group VK3WYN. Very good morning, Jack, and good morning, Herb, and good morning to listeners also. And let me see, not a bad day. Most enjoyable, this sort of weather. So making the most of this. I was up pretty early this morning here, doing a few things outside, and got those done before the heat of the day is upon us. And Jack, let me see, note the news there, Jack. And yes, I'm always interested in those comments, Jack, about the antenna current there. That seems to vary quite a bit. I assume that's varying from the low power to the high power situation of your transmitter there. And it takes a little while to get up to speed. And also wondered, of course, if that antenna current must vary. If your antenna impedance is varying there, Jack, a little bit. So quite interesting. Yes, the ground is certainly dry outside, isn't it? I dug a small series of holes in the ground this morning in which to plant some spring onions. These are the ones I pick up from just the greengrocers. But as Herb explained to me, and I've done ever since, they last very well if you pop them in the ground. But gee whiz, it's quite dry when you dig there. And that was in a relatively shady spot as well. So amazing where the water goes, isn't it, so quickly. Jack, noticed the clean-up proceeding, and just wonder if you've found any real treasures there yet. Especially ones you don't want, Jack. Keep WYN in mind. Always keen on collecting, as you know. And let's see. Oh, note the getting organised for the hospital visit there later this week, I think it is, Jack. So hope that all goes according to plan. And what else was there? Oh, the SWR bridge. Still investigations there, Jack. Possibly a couple of diodes you mentioned. So at least they're pretty inexpensive, aren't they? Even if you have to just buy a couple. You mentioned amateur radio for this month, Feb. No, I haven't received mine yet. I've had the January one for quite some time. I think that arrived early in January. but they've not received the Feb issue yet, so I'll keep an eye out for that. And let's see, as I say, greetings to you both and to listeners. And now, Herb, I've forgotten, well, I didn't forget, I was otherwise tied up when the Old Timers broadcast was scheduled for this morning. I was in fact having a chat to the SMA on the telephone about the interference problem. So, and I am expecting a call back. So if I have to leave abruptly the microphone here, you'll understand why. So as a result of that phone call, I missed the Old Timers broadcast. Note, Jack, you missed the Institute broadcast yesterday. And they do have a broadcast in the evening, Jack, as well. So, speak of the devil, there is the 600 ohm device. Herb, would you like to take it? VK3JO, VK3WYN.
Yes, no, the taker's heard in the pause. VK3JO replying. And good morning, Jack. Good morning, Brian. Although you'll have to answer that 600 ohm circuit. So, right. Copied all okay. Good signals as usual. Weather beautiful. And quite, plenty of sunshine. Calm conditions. And going to warm up, apparently. Well, it's summer, so I guess it's performing better that way than it usually does, with cloudy and very indifferent conditions. Never mind. Jack, yes, noted your comments there about the RF current fluctuating, and certainly that has been the case with that forest phone, I think it is, that you're using this morning, over quite some time, where it will suddenly jump up and drop back again and jump up and drop back again before eventually stabilising. It makes a difference of about 2 divisions on the meter that I've got here, which I can't relate to dB nor anything like that, but obviously you can notice the difference there in the current, 400 to 800 milliamps of RF. So there's quite obviously something wrong. I wonder whether you've tried that into a dummy load to see whether it performs in the same way into a dummy load. Although that RF meter is in the antenna, but if you've got a power meter, of course, in the connection to the dummy load, it would indicate also. Then you've got that SWR meter that you're working on for that, possibly to use it in that way. And note that you've, I wonder, have you checked the meter itself to make sure that is functioning properly? I would certainly think the 1N34s would be the appropriate diodes to use in that, but pay to check it out with reference to handbooks and so on, where construction of these things is described. But from the way you spoke there, with the knowledge of the current requirements of the different types, I would think that you're on the right track. Right. Notice the general clean-up and the apparatus, and also the haircut preparatory to Thursday week's hospitalisation. And also you managed to miss the broadcast. Well, look, I can't tell you exactly what was in it now either, but I found it interesting, and Steve did the work there from the WIA transmitting site. He said somewhere in the middle of the Mornington Peninsula. I thought it was in the Lyndhurst area, but apparently it's a fairly isolated spot. And He was complaining that there was no water there. Apparently that had been cut off for some reason or another. But he did have quite a lot of response on, I listened to it on 80, on the FT101, and there's an almost endless stream of callbacks reporting on reception of the broadcast. So there's quite a lot of people that were listening to it. And there was a couple of items that he mentioned there that I sort of queried a bit. It was concerning his mention of the RAOTC luncheon, and the people there were saying it's open to all WIA members, and certainly it's really for the Old Timers Club, but they're throwing it open to all members who care to come. But he made no mention of it being just the OTC members, not all of them, or put it this way, being a member of the WIA is not a requirement for joining the Old Timers Club, to the best of my knowledge. Anyway, and the other thing was that the repeat broadcast for the Old Timers, that'll be on tonight, 1850, 8:30, wait a minute, 3650 is what I meant, 3650, 3650. And that was publicised as being 3615, which is the frequency that the WI broadcast was on anyway, 80 metres. So if you happen to get a chance from 8:30, you could hear the Old Timers broadcast, which was very interesting, and ran for about 20, 25 minutes, something like that. And that'll be repeated tonight on 3650, 8:30. And right, so that was that. So anyway, it was coming through here on 40 metres also. I had the set tuned up on 40, and that was coming through quite well here too. So that's the Old Timers. I was interested to hear that Bob 3EL called in after on the 2 metre callback this morning with a request for an original Homecrafts catalogue. Anyone knows one of those for a friend of his in VK2? I'm afraid I can't oblige. And anyway, that was one thing of one only. Well, you won't get that tonight anyway. That's not part of the broadcast. That's part of the callback. Okay, let's see. Where do we go from there? Brian with the spring onions. Yes. Oh well, I do the same thing. I heard that lurk about trying to keep them. You have to buy a bunch of spring onions, and I found that they don't keep particularly well in the fridge. By the time you get through using about one a day, you don't. They don't keep the best. But I heard over broadcast on air comment somewhere, broadcast band, that put them in the ground, keep them watered, and that seems to be a good way to preserve them. So that's what I do, try to use a shady spot. And Brian was noting, of course, that the ground was dry. And if you want to keep it moist, well, put some sheets of newspaper around them. I've done that with tomatoes and some silver beet, and I've usually been putting a bit of water in there since the weather has been so dry lately and temperature so warm. And last evening while I was doing it, there's a peek underneath lifted the papers, and the ground was quite damp underneath. So that does prevent evaporation from the soil, so you can save water that way. Anyway, I haven't done that around the spring onions because it would be a damn nuisance trying to dig one out when I wanted it each day. Usually chop it up with the lunch sandwich. Had no amateur radio as yet, and on note that Brian missed the Old Timers broadcast. Oh, well, maybe he can hear it tonight then on 80. So note his phone call, so it's probably to do with all the interference, so that's something worthwhile there too. I was noticing it a little bit this morning myself, way down in the background when there was a carrier, unmodulated carrier on. So it's still there, still going happily. And activity from my end here, I haven't done a great deal more to the AR7. I've had the usual contact Saturday morning with Joe. What was I doing? I did spend a bit of time at it, but I'm still not satisfied with the way the crystal filter arrangement is functioning. I can't seem to get much sense out of that. Although I think I've got the IFs lined up pretty well according to the instructions, one lot of instructions. And I want to try the other instructions because there's 3 lots of instructions I've got, and they're all a little bit different. So I have to try them all to see which is which. But I'm still not happy with the crystal filter arrangement. Doesn't seem to function properly. I did notice that the crystal filter is, the crystals on top of a separate enclosure contained within the set, and that's a plug-in arrangement, an old type thing. It's got a valve socket that it plugs into. What's it, an octal socket, I think it might be. So it plugs in there, so of course it's a sort of pre-war design anyway, or wartime design, so that's varied in the post-war years. But the box covers a couple of coils which are part and parcel of the circuit. One of them's the IF transformer coming from the converter stage, and there's also a few capacitors and a split stator condenser, plus another separate coil, which is the coil feeding the grid of the first IF stage. So anyway, they're all enclosed in this compartment, and I noticed that there was only one screw holding it, and it wasn't particularly firm to give the thing a move and to get a crackling response. I pulled it out and put it back again, and just had a look, thought things needed a bit of cleaning up, but that's about all I did with it. Put it all back again, but I think I'll better pull it out again and make sure the other components there are satisfactory. It might be something like that, or even undo the crystal holder and pull out the actual quartz slab and see what that's like. It might do with a cleaning up, for all I know. It seemed to be pretty well hermetically sealed, but it's quite possible that clean up there might make all the difference. Anyway, that's about all radio-wise from this neck of the woods. So I've been waffling on for far too long. Hopefully Brian will have fixed up the SMA phone call. Presumably it was that. And maybe he'd like to continue before putting it back to you there, Jack. So this is VK3JO with the morning coffee group, comprising VK3EB, VK3WYN, and myself, VK3JO, now standing by.
VK3AP on frequency.
VK3AP, acknowledge you there, Al, VK3AP, and the group, VK3WYN, returning to a vacated spot. Al, good morning to you. I'll just check I'm not doubling. Al, the order of of things here, if you've not heard us a little bit earlier. Jack, VK3EB, started off the session, followed by myself, WYN, followed by Herb, and then you'll follow Herb there, Al. Now what happened was I was called away on the phone in the early part of my over. Herb's already had a say, so what I'll do is I'll pass it to you there, Al, but then the next time round, the order will be Jack, myself, Herb and yourself, Al. So I think that'll get it all pretty organised there. And let's see, yes, now the phone call during my previous over, that was in fact from the SMA, returning my earlier call and giving me a contact name there who will ring me from the other cable TV company. Now, I won't mention the names or anything on the phone, but sufficient to say that the SMA has advised that this second cable TV company is aware of the problem, and it is, as far as they know, apparently due to the installation of additional devices there, which coincides with that around about 4 months ago, all that activity down in the streets here. So they've got other reports apparently, so that's quite interesting. So it might be on the way to getting something done. Certainly hope so. Now let me see, Jack, I'd covered your comments and I was halfway through mine. I think I'd got up to mentioning the WIA broadcast that's repeated in the evenings there on the Sunday, Jack. So that's handy to know if you do miss it as you did. And Herb, thanks for the Old Timers evening broadcast time and frequency there. I had the frequency, so the 8:30 confirms the time, and I'll certainly have a listen to that. Jack, some of the points raised on the Institute broadcast you may be interested in. I just did a sort of a summary as they went through them. They started off by mentioning the Old Timers get-together, so Herb's already covered that. I don't know if Herb mentioned that whilst I was on the phone and out of earshot, the guest speaker is going to be an ex-radar officer, VK5 I think is the chap. I haven't got his whole call sign here, but that should be rather interesting. And of course the general get-together there at the Old Timers Luncheon, and swap a few tales of your there. They mentioned the EMDRC White Elephant sale coming up in a while. I missed the date on that, but that'll be no doubt a flyer will accompany the AR. Quite a bit of talk on matters technical and scientific, which was rather interesting. Bit of a mention there on the broadcast, Jack and Al, of computers. Problems with the approaching date change for the year 2000, which apparently some early computers can't read. All they read is 4 zeros, so that'd be a big help. And what else was there? Oh yes, and a bit of a talk about the ozone layer depletion there, the ozone hole as it's known, by Steve, 3HK. Steve was the broadcast presenter there for the WIA broadcast, Jack and Al, if you didn't happen to listen to it. And Steve happened to mention towards the end of the broadcast he was running out of voice power. Apparently the water supply to their establishment where they broadcast from had been disconnected, so there was no water to lubricate the vocal cords. So by the end of the broadcast, as you can well imagine, the broadcaster there was a bit croaky. Yes, good call back. I heard you mention that, Herb. I listened and gave a call back on 80 metres. I didn't listen to the 2 metre broadcast. I thought I would try 80 metres. That was a very good copy, and good signals from all around the state as well on the callback, of which there were plenty. Herb, one of the stations you mentioned there, Bob, VK3 Echo Lima, He also called back on 80, but not with that request, or not that I heard about the magazine. I've made a note of that old Homecrafts catalogue. I'll have a look through my heap of books here, and if I've got one, he's welcome to use it. Let me see what else has been happening. Oh, a bit of news since we last caught up. Friday afternoon, had a very interesting session on 40 metres. Very good copy within Australia, VK2s, 3s and 4s, but around about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, our local time, and very good copy, as I say, on 40 metres there. So that was quite interesting. And the usual activity there on 80 metres on the net. And what else? Oh, and a very nice visit on Saturday. I paid a visit to Leo, VK3 Yankee X-ray. Leo lives about 1 mile from me, probably less in a straight line. So had a very pleasant stay at his place. And I think Herb knows this story. I mentioned it yesterday. Leo had some bits and pieces surplus to requirements, but they were up in the attic. Now, Saturday afternoon was a bit warm. There was a cool breeze, but there was no cool breeze in the attic of his house. So anyway, I was offered these bits and pieces if I'd like to go up into the attic and get them, which I did. So it was a bit warm up there, of course, but well worth the effort. And one of the little prize possessions I now have, an RF ammeter. I've never had one before in all the years of being interested in radio, and I've often heard you all talking about your antenna current there on the ammeters. So I now have one. It's the type that has the meter separate from the thermocouple. So one can, if one wishes, mount the meter remote from the thermocouple. And I think it goes up to about 0.75 of an amp. So I'll be very careful with that, not to burn out the thermocouple. I might start off with a shunt across that to start off with. So that was quite good. As I say, I've never owned one of those before, so that was a great acquisition there. And had a very interesting chat there with Leo about his various antenna experiments. Leo's vertical at the moment. He's now running strictly a vertical antenna for 80 metres, and also it will work on 40, of course. But he's used it on 80 and getting very good results from it. End-fed aluminium vertical. It's about, let's see, I think it's 12 metres, around about 12 metres in height. And fed and matched and loaded at the base with a coil and a variometer. Some of you might be interested to hear that. There's a loading coil, and in addition to the loading coil, a variometer, which he's able to use to actually get the tuning and loading spot on. So I thought I would mention that. I've used one of those in the past on receiving, of course, and no doubt you've all used them. I think you still do, Herb, on your ATU there. So no doubt they've all been in use over the years at each respective station. So with that, what I better do, I'll pass it to you there, Al. Herb had finished his over, and Al, if you pass it back to Jack. VK3 Alpha Papa and the group VK3 WYN.
Yes, thanks, Brian, and good morning all. I'm sorry I'm a bit late this morning. I've had breakfast in bed, as usual, and I just went to sleep again, and I woke up and my wife came in, and I just looked at my watch and my goodness, 11:20. Time I was up. I got up. I'm sorry about that, but I don't know. We had a very bad night on Saturday. We're out to a church function. It was, or not exactly a function, but arranged by the church people about cards. I know it sounds funny, but we play this little game of whisk, crazy whisk, and so forth. And so we just kept going. And we were out for about an hour away from the street, and just plucking up courage to go back, because anything can happen, you know, with these groups of people, especially when alcohol is involved, because they were walking up the street throwing cans about everywhere, so we got out of it. I know it sounds funny, but we got back a little while later and we couldn't see anybody, so we just quietly sneaked in, and we sat in the car for quite some time too, just to make sure everything was right, and then we virtually braved up enough courage to go inside, and we were very mindful of cracks and thumps and things which were going on after that, but we couldn't find the reason. Incidentally, this is VK3AP. So here we are. And I wasn't feeling in the best of moods either, because had a general clean up in the house and the garden, and well, that's how it goes. But everything seems all right now. I don't know what's been going on. I've heard your news, Brian, mostly yours, and heard from Herb too. But we'll keep going. And firstly, you mentioned the QRM that you've been getting from the pay TV antennas, I think, and involving the SMA. Yes, well, that's very good. It's nice to keep them informed of what's happening. And I've got down here ozone depletion. You were talking about that, but I'm not quite sure what it refers to, but and also congratulations on getting an RF ammeter. Yes, I've got a few here, but fortunately they've all got their thermocouples, largely because I haven't been putting them in anywhere near RF. But one does work on RF. It's over 1 amp, has a thermocouple which is separate from the meter itself, and I get a reading of about 0.4 of an amp on my 2 meters, IC22S. So it's a good check on just what is going on there. And okay about meeting Leo and the variometer. Yes, well, that's very nice to hear those words mentioned, the variometer, because they're as old as the hills, and I'm not even quite sure what's involved in them, but it seems quite interesting anyway. And I'm glad to know you got one there, Brian. I've got a few here, but I'm really rather scared of using them. Because you only use them once. That's generally the question. Use them once and that's it. Because you've got to be very, very careful that you know exactly what you're doing when you put it in the antenna circuit. And no standing waves or anything like that, because if the current exceeds what the meter is designed for, you can lose it very quickly. You've got to be very, very quick. I remember years ago I used an RF ammeter, which was a hot wire type. A very, very simple construction. There was no thermocouple or anything in it. All it was a little piece of nichrome wire or something like that with some form of hand attachment to it, and it went up to 5 amps. And I thought it was quite good. But it had to be adjusted all the time because it's affected by ambient temperature and so forth, and it was just a matter of getting the pointer zeroed each time, because it would vary even after you'd used it. It would show some variation. I don't even know what happened to that, but it was quite effective. I didn't even check it for accuracy or anything. But I remember quite well it went to 8 or 5 amps. And quite a nice little job too. But like all these things, they disappear, and I probably lent it to someone and he liked it or something. So that was that. Now, coming back to Herb was talking about spring onions and tomatoes and spreading newspaper and that around on the soil. Yes, that's quite an effective gardening ploy. And I didn't get too much detail on it. And also the Old Timers broadcast, I missed that as well, for the same reason. I just dozed off and went right through it. And okay, Herb, about the AR7, the crystal plug-in. Yes, well, as I mentioned before, I've got a few AR7 crystals here. They're very thick ones. They're about almost an eighth of an inch thick. And one of them I've checked with a BC221, and that's dead accurate, right on 455. The other ones are not quite so accurate, but they can be padded and adjusted. And a favourite trick of mine is to put little strips of mica between the crystal and the holder and bring them right back to frequency. But the frequency was only out about 100 cycles or so, so I don't think that would matter very much. And okay, about the box, I'm not familiar with the AR7 as I used to be. I used to service them when I was in the Air Force, but I think there have been changes to the construction. But I do know the crystal was in a little holder and held by 4 screws and was plug in. But that's about as far as I can go. Right, well now I've had enough to say, so we'll put it back to Jack and find out what's been going on in Jack's neck of the woods, as they say. So VK3EB to transmit with the group listening, VK3AP.
Just allowing a pause there in case Jerry came on. I thought he may be about. He had work to do before he was going to come on if he could make it. Good morning to you all. 3AP. Your strength was this morning, Brian, strength 8, Herb 10/9, and L is strength 8. So that's how I read you on the meter. I noticed with this forest phone there, I've been giving it a bit of thought one way and the other, and I was just thinking that I must take it apart again and test the crystal, because if the crystal's a little bit sluggish and slow coming on from time to time, and that may be causing the trouble, the actual crystal, I would think. Like it's dropped down to 400 milliamps. Well, whether it's sluggish or dirty points on the crystal, I'm not quite certain, but I was just thinking, well, that might be an answer to the problem. Obviously, it's something to do with the oscillator, I would think, to be varying as it does. It's jumped up again at 750 milliamps RF. Incidentally, this is a 1 amp thermocouple type M meter, so I've got to be careful I don't get too close to the head. Like you, Al, I've got a 4 amp hot wire meter that I used to use out in the garage. I think I used it with an FT200, and that would put out about 100 watts there, but I can't remember, it's too long ago now, as to what current it used to put out in the aerial. So that's a 5 amp, and I think I've got another one that's a 3 amp thermocouple type. But the 1 amp's the best as far as the scale's concerned, of course. That's why I'm using it. Apart from that, the forest phone is low enough in power not to push things too hard. Although I'm getting a very good reading at the moment. So I was just wondering whether it might be dirty points, contacts. I've got a crystal checker that I made years ago out in the garage, and I was just thinking I might take the crystal out and just check it a couple of times and see how it compares, particularly in relation with another 1825. But theoretically, I should have a D-type, which is the small one, 1825 crystal, but I don't know what's happened to the jolly thing. I've been looking everywhere for it for a couple of years, I think, and I haven't found it. But if I could find that, I could swap the crystal over. The only crystal I've got 1825 is one I use with an 6V6, a little transmitter I made out in the garage, and that's an F-type crystal, which is much larger and of course wouldn't fit in the crystal socket, nor would it have the necessary head clearance to get the box back together. So I wouldn't be quite happy to buy another crystal. I think I might have to get in touch with a crowd. I noticed that the F-type crystal I've got was made by Maxwell Howden at Canterbury in those days, but I see his son operates the business apparently, and he's located at Murrelbark or somewhere up in those, somewhere out in the sticks there anyhow. And I was thinking I could tee up another crystal, but a D-type, and get it underway. It'd be money well spent. I was thinking of spending some money on another mast, but they're pretty dear, and you've got the additional problem of the cartridge on them. But I want a 21-foot length of 1.5 inch hard-drawn aluminium tubing for another mast there to overcome my 2-metre problem. But I haven't got round to that either. But I wouldn't, perhaps I better put the money into the crystal. Although I'll wait and see if I can get to the Eastern and Mountain District Hamfest. I may just pick up a crystal there. And it's a matter of whipping around the tables fairly quickly to determine what's available and then making a purchase. But I want to get an SWR bridge. That's why I've been battling on with the bridge here off and on, because running the test into the dummy load, I've got to have a meter in circuit. It's no use just running. I can run it into the dummy load. That's only a matter of a screw connection. But the point is to have an SWR meter in circuit to give you the appropriate reading. And I'm not satisfied with the big meter I've got. It's one of those things you read forward and read reverse, and then you refer to a graph. And I've never been able to get a low reading with it at any time, so I don't want to use that one. And I usually use that with the 301D. So that's the story there. Now the jolly crystal, if that's the trouble, has held all that time. So theoretically, you could say, I suppose, that it's not that. But it just dawned on me that that might be the trouble. You know, a misbehaving crystal. And how do you know whether it's operating successfully or not? Except in a crystal checker. And I dare say I could check that 6 times, and it would indicate a positive reaction, and then I put it in the set and it starts blowing up again, so you wouldn't know, would you? So it's just one of those things. Now, I'd possibly have a listen to the Old Timers Club rebroadcast tonight, Herb, on 3650 at 8:30, as long as I think of it. That's the main thing. And okay on the AR7, and another thing you haven't mentioned for a while, Herb, is how the Heathkit's going, whether you've finished that to your satisfaction. Okay on the broadcast, people running out of water, well, they better take a bottle of water with them, or a couple of cans of light, or whatever the case may be, or some ice lemonade or something, just so that they... well, I'd always supposed to carry water in the car in any case, although I can't say I do it these days. But always did it in the old days, just in case you happen to break down on a hot day. The first thing you want's a drink. Yes, okay, Al, on the hooligans. I suppose they'd all got booze somewhere, and they were then carrying on and in an aggressive manner. I would have gone straight to the police if I were you and your wife. But of course most police stations are closed down after dark, aren't they? But if they were manned at all, they could have phoned through and got a patrol car to pay a call. That's what I'd do. And certainly after sitting in your car when you got in your driveway there, it would have paid, and probably it did pay, not to put any lights on in the house. Once you got inside, shut yourself in and not put any lights on, because that would give them a clue then as to where that car that they were abusing went to. So there we are. Okay, I'll put it to you, Brian, VK3, and thanks for the info on the broadcast. VK3WYN and the group, VK3B. It looks as though the magazine's going to be late this month if you haven't got it, because you both JO and WYN get it before I do, and my fellow usually sticks to it for a couple of days before he delivers it. So it'll be interesting to see whether the postie brings it today or not. VK3WY and the group YN, and I'll say good morning all round because time's ticking on and I'm holding things up. So I'll say good morning all round, good morning to our shortwave listeners, and over to VK3WYN. VK3B is now listening.
VK3EB and the group VK3WYN. Yes, good copy on everybody there, including your signal, Jack. I have a bit of a tussle here with this interference, but your signal's overriding it nice and easily there. I noticed, Jack, the signal reports you're giving myself lately, I'm not sure if the other stations have gone down as well, but around about a month or so back, I was usually getting around about a 9 plus 10 from you, Jack. And I see I'm down to sort of 9s and 8.5s and 8s. I hope I'm not disappearing from audibility there. So just wondered if it's the same unit that you're giving the readings on, or if it's perhaps a general alteration at your end there with the drying out of the ground and all that sort of thing, Jack. So be interested to know what both Herb and Al are getting with their readings, if they're gradually diminishing as well, or if it's just myself here. So if it's me, I'll be a bit concerned. Let's see, Herb, you'll follow me, and I already mentioned about the Old Timers rebroadcast this evening, or mentioned that you mentioned it, Herb, so thanks for that. And also about the Homecrafts catalogue for Bob, VK3 Echo Lima. I will have a look for that and see if I have one. And, yes, Herb, back on the spring onions in the ground. I guess the only way you could do that easily with the newspaper trick to keep the moisture in the soil would be just put the newspaper there first and just punch a hole in the paper and into the soil. That's all I usually do. Just got a wooden dowel and just make about an inch hole there and pop the onion in the hole. So might try that with the newspaper. Certainly conserve the moisture there. And that's the extent of my veggie garden here, by the way, for the others on the net. In size it would be about 3 feet by about 6 inches. So there we are. It's not a huge cultivation job, but certainly keeps those spring onions very nice. And Herb, with the Saturday CW contact with your friend Joe, I just wondered, is he back to good health there? I think he was a little bit crook there for a week or so. So I hope he's back to how he should be, Herb. And something, when you visit Joe, I think you might be taking the AR7 over there, or the coil boxes, or something or other for a check. If you want to be bothered, you might take that Philips signal generator as well. And Joe would be able to check that against his accurate testing equipment and then you would know where you are more exactly with that old valve signal generator. So just a thought there might give you an idea of how close it is to calibration. I'm pretty sure that limited range for intermediate frequency signals there, Herb, that's the signal generator scale that covers 400 up to 500 kilohertz. That is pretty accurate, I know from having used it. But the other general sort of HF bands may be a little bit out. So if you need an accurate readout, that might be the way to go. Get Joe to check it for you. And note the continuing work there regarding that crystal filter circuit, Herb, on the AR7. And I think, as I mentioned when we last talked about that, they're just a bridge network, and the crystal is one arm of the bridge, of course. So they're quite ingenious how they work there. Let's see. Now, Al, well, interested to hear about the weekend street meeting there, Al, as I would term it. Yeah, these things happen, don't they, from time to time. And I think it's just best to, if there's no damage to actual houses or things like that, best just to, let them enjoy what they're doing there and move on down the street. I don't think it achieves much getting the police involved. All they can do is, just appear and then they've got to disappear. So I think most of those events, they sort of, as the grog wears off or they fall asleep, events take their natural course. So probably been out celebrating or something like that. And interested in the comments there, Al, on the various ammeters there, the hot wire type. Yes, I had one of those years back, but it did burn out much overload. So, but as I say, I've not had one of the thermocouple type ammeters before, so I shall be quite interested to see how this works. Al, the reference to the ozone layer, in case you wondered what that was in reference to, that was one of the topics that was covered on the WIA broadcast on Sunday morning. There was just a reference to that and what had been observed over the years since it had been discovered. So that was how that came for a mention there, Al. And let me see, Jack. Yes, likewise, Jack. Note you've signed. I've got an eye on the clock here, so hopefully you're still with us. And note your comments also, Jack, about the various meters, the thermocouple type and the hot wire type. Jack, you mentioned those 1825 kilohertz crystals and keeping an eye out at the ham fests. Look, they're like the proverbial hen's teeth, Jack. I've had my eye open, I think, for every ham fest I've gone to, and I've never yet come across one of those. Plenty of other frequencies, but the 1825, they don't seem to be on the trestles there. So anyway, I'll be looking again. But they're certainly sought after, aren't they? Another commonly used one, Jack, that is readily available for 160 metres is 1843. I don't know if you've got one of those in your forest phone, or in your case you'd need two, wouldn't you? I think you're crystal locked on receive as well. In the teleradio, which is a tunable receive, I just need the one crystal for varying the frequency, and I have got the 1843 kilohertz crystal as well, and that's quite handy if there happens to be a station working on 1825, can just switch to the other crystal locked frequency there. And those 1843 crystals, Jack, they're quite cheap to buy at the shops. I think they're quite reasonably priced, probably about 5 dB or something like that. So mention that for what it's worth. Yes, Amateur Radio Magazine, Jack, I'll keep an eye out for that. And as you say, we usually get them fairly early, both Herb and myself here. And usually look forward to reading what's in that, of course. And what else? Oh, something I forgot to mention over the weekend. I watched the Heartbeat program and the House of Elliot, and by gee, they have problems, don't they? The Elliot sisters with their fashion house. They seem to have to do everything except design clothes to stay in business there. What with the battles with the banks and the domestic upheavals and the romantic attachments, it's quite an interesting series there. Something of interest on last night, I don't know if any of you watched it, it was a documentary report on the film Citizen Kane, which featured Orson Welles, and that actual film is being broadcast, I think, later in this week. I think it's on Wednesday. So, but last night they had a very interesting documentary on the life and times of Randolph Hearst, the newspaper chap, and also on Orson Welles, the actor, and it was very interesting to watch. I wonder if any of you did watch that. Herb, round to you, VK3JO and the group VK3WYN.
Okay, Brian, but Jack, do you want to have a final say there before we depart? VK3JO, bye.
Yes, okay, thanks. Thanks, Herb. I was just thinking too, Ben, that talking about 1825 crystals, that I may have put that crystal in the marine rig I've got out in the garage. So I might be able to whiz that out and test that and try that in the forest phone. And if that's the problem, that would solve it. Anyhow, it'd be worth putting a half an hour in on it and testing the crystals and giving it a go. So I'll do that too. Okay, thanks, Herb, and good morning all round, and back to you. VK3JO to take it. VK3B is now off and clear.
Yes, okay, Jack, VK3JO replying to the group. I don't think your crystal's the problem. You've got plenty of carrier, it's quite stable, and it's just that there's somewhere further in the circuit there that some contact is indefinite, and it can automatically come good. So I think it'll be a case of trying to measure voltages and so on at different points, and trying to locate the fault that way. So, but anyway, it's a simple thing to try, so that would at least eliminate one possibility. And I was thinking much the same with the crystal filter in the AR7. A different crystal in that would indicate whether the problem that I've got is actually in the crystal or not. So anyway, not to worry. At the moment, we'll make a few other tests, and especially with Joe. Yes, he's okay, and he was telling me that he's got some privilege now that he didn't have before, to wit, key to the workshop. He was able to get into the lab all right, and he was a bit disappointed that he didn't have a key to the workshop before, so he's got that. So that should help. Yes, well, look, I'm not sure that I'll be taking that in. I think there'll be quite enough to carry in there to with this AR7 receiver itself, power supply, and I'd better take the speaker in. So that's quite enough, I think. Since the lab is up on about the 3rd floor and everything's on the ground floor. I mean, your entrance is on the ground floor, and the lift's not big enough to drive the car in to take it up to the 3rd floor. And of course, in any event, you've got to use the particular card to get into the place in the first place. Ah, dear, right. So that's the setup there. Right. Anyways, if you're still listening there, Jack, Okay, about the meters and the crystals and the aluminium tube and the heath kit. Well, I haven't done anything further with it. I had wanted to trace the circuitry of the additional power supplies that have been put in. I have done that, but in order to do it, I had to remove some filter capacitors that Joe had put in some time ago, and I just haven't replaced them. And then I've got to try and organise a relay arrangement to change over from one to the other. But I was hoping I'd be able to get this receiver going and use that. Since the junk box set packed up, I was using that with the 813 rig, and that's why I haven't been using that rig. So anyway, I thought, well, I better try and get something going there in the way of receiver. Always use the car radio, but that's manual changeover too, extra switch to push that in and out. Try to get something with a simple changeover arrangement. Okay, catch you tomorrow then, Jack. If you're still listening. Let's see, Al, okay about everything there. Breakfast in bed. Gee, yes, that's a very unsettling experience there to have a group like that. And as you say, they think they're a law unto themselves and everybody else has got to get out of their way. Walking on the road, gee, they're asking for trouble doing that sort of thing. But I suppose that's the way the grog affects them. They seem to think they can control everything and everybody else has got to bow to their requirements and everybody's an enemy. So, gee, yes, I think you did the right thing, just sort of keeping going and steering clear of them altogether, giving them a chance to disperse before going back there. Where you are in that dead-end street, of course, they could, well, if you could have got through them and up there, well, they'd know the house and they're just as likely to wreck the place just because you've had the cheek to get past them. Something like that. Oh, gee, it's wicked that that sort of thing goes on, and one of the reasons why if I am out at night, like to get back home early so that you don't run into that sort of thing. You never know where they're going to crop up, and they've got no respect for anybody else, and especially if they think that these people couldn't fight back, so we'll have a go at them. That's an added incentive, I think, from their point of view. I reckon they can't fight back, so do whatever mischief they can and depart the scene before anybody can get around to catch them. Right, let's see. You remembered more of the broadcast than I did. I couldn't think of the different topics there, Brian, but yes, it was quite interesting, wasn't it? Note the thermocouples there, the also comments there. Those that I've had have only been those that I got through disposals after the war, and they were 1.5 amp full-scale deflection, but after using them for a little while without damage, didn't have enough current to wear that out, but some fault developed in the thermocouple, and instead of the normal range, at least I think it was in the thermocouple, it started reading full-scale deflection, so brought that out of service, and then it wasn't long before that passed out completely. I think I put a short circuit across it so that I could still use it and get an indication, but then it wasn't long before that passed out completely, and useless that way. So what I've had there have turned out to be a white elephant sort of thing. The only use the meters are now is as milliamp meters. I think they give roughly about a 12 or 14 milliamps for scale deflection. Right, so they're not much use. Oh dear. Right, anyway, that's the only thermocouples that I've had any experience with them. And I know in the era when the WIA had an instrument library, and they used to loan meters out to members. It wasn't uncommon for the RF meters to come back with burnt out burnt out thermocouples. Yes, I think they didn't know about the water being cut off out there at the venue. And from what Steve was saying there, it's quite a long walk from where he parks the car. And apparently he has to take all the gear with him, which is understandable because I think they did get a break in there on one occasion. So you can't go and leave anything out there. It's likely to be vandalised. Right, anyway, sort of hopping from one thing to another there. So, yes, noted your comments, Brian, there about Leo and the antenna that he's using, vertical there, and the variometer. Oh, the only one I've got is that one that Reg gave me, and I've used that as a tuning arrangement for the aerial for the low frequency. That's the only place I've used that, and it doesn't appear to be very effective there either. But I wished I did have something on in the form of a vario coupler on this coil I've got here, because I think that would help me to get a more accurate position for the inductance. At the moment, the meter is reading just over 10 watts, and usually at that adjustment into the dummy load that I'm using, it's about 15 watts. So there's obviously some mismatch there, and it doesn't appear to make any difference to the signal strength output, but evidently we haven't got 50 ohms coming into the output of the meter. Well, not the same as the dummy load, which is 50 ohms, or pretty close to it. Right, anyway, that's vertical antennas and Leo. Oh yes, you know, they work quite well. In the early days it was quite a thing to put a vertical for 40 metres, and I've known that there have been chaps who'd go to the extent of erecting a 70-foot mast in their backyard in order to support the 66 feet of wire. Not quite sure how they fed the thing, whether it was open wire feeders into the centre, but you know, that was one of the features of trying to get low angle radiation. All help in the DX chase. Yeah, so well, let's see what else we're talking about. Oh, the Homecrafts catalogue, probably around about the 1920s. Bob wants it for a VK2 chap, whom he said was well in his 80s and was interested in compiling some sort of an article and of radio at that stage, and this Homecrafts catalogue. Certainly that was the place where we first bought bits and pieces that we couldn't get otherwise. I think a single earphone, coil of aerial wire, probably the crystal, I'm not sure what other things, homemade variable condenser or something, or it was a slider, the first one. That was all homemade. Wire for the slider coil. Right, oh yes, another notes I've made here, a white elephant sail, yes, that'll be coming up soon. That was noted somewhere in the broadcast. Right, note the telephone conversation. I want to get in touch with them too about this license renewal and see the requirements for the, I think, full 5-year period. And I'll have to get that going because mine is due on the 27th, so I thought I'd give them a ring this afternoon. Note the other comments too there, Brian, about the 40 metres Friday afternoon, RF meters, Leo, Al, breakfast in bed, late night, Saturday night, missing out on the, if you do have a chance to listen to the Old Timers broadcast, yes, 8:30 tonight, 3650, and yesterday it was announced that the repeat broadcast would be well, his actual words, Steve, I'm quoting, was the normal frequencies for the 10 o'clock broadcast, and the other times, 11 and 12 or whatever it was, and 3615 for the repeat. So I mentioned that this morning, and when I called back reporting on the Old Timers broadcast, and I'm sure that Alan announced it as being the usual 13650. So I thought I'd better point that out and let him handle it with Steve. And that's, Steve recorded the thing, the initial broadcast, and he used the second broadcast for the repeat performance. I'm not sure whether that was done from the Lyndhurst site at night, or whether Steve did it from his own location. But I had to switch the attenuator in, RF attenuator in, to keep the signal below the plus 60 dB on the scale. So it was quite a strong signal there last night, and quite good, almost about the same there in the morning. And he had a terrific number of people call him back there, so complaining of the dry throat, and then having to spend about another half hour or so on the call back, at least another half hour, I think it was. So he had quite a day of it. Right, well, I think that's about enough from me too, and my throat's been a bit croaky too, so I'd better pull another one of those spring onions out of the ground and shove it between a couple of slices of bread and a few other things and start munching on that. So all the best to both of you there, Brian and Al, and hope to see you again later on. Should be on tomorrow as usual. So hope you have a nice day. VK3JO concluding with the group. Listen through for final comments. 38P will be the next one to follow, and all the best to all our many listeners. Also, VK3JO standing by.
Yes, thanks, Herb. VK3AP entering the group again, and I listened with interest to all the remarks there about crystals and so forth. And the funny thing, I pulled out the little crystal that I got from Max Howden many, many years ago, and I don't know whether I got it in person, but I remember calling up to a little house in Canterbury where Max lived, or somewhere nearby, and discussed this crystal with him. Of course, in those days, finances weren't the best, and I had to be very careful I didn't over-exceed the budget, as it were. But I finally got this crystal, and it's been very good ever since. I've taken it apart a few times just to clean it and do that with it, but ostensibly it's pretty close on 1825. It was made for 1825 kilohertz, and he's got a little formula underneath there. Temperature coefficient less than 1 cycle per degree centigrade. I don't think that would have worried us on 1825. And thanks very much for the report too, Jack. Pleased to get that from you, because I know I haven't got the full radiating power here that I used to have, the antenna that is, and it's quite nice to know that you're able to copy me anyway. I'm going through my notes here, which are all over the place today. There was some interesting talk about RF ammeters too. Yes, I've always had some RF ammeter on the premises, but I haven't worried too much about them. I'm hardly scared of them, because you've just got to exceed the... It's like a lamp in a filament. You just exceed the ratings a little bit and bang, it's gone. And that's just exactly what happens with the old thermocouple. But I was very fortunate in getting quite a few of these from my old boss at Channel 9, who was also a ham, but I don't think he he gave it away in the end. The big 10 kilowatt transmitter up on the mountain there. You wouldn't be worried about ham frequencies. But I remember getting these meters from him, and I checked them all the other night, only about a month ago, I think it'd be. And I was quite surprised to find I had 0 to 1 amp meters and 0 to 6, 2 0 to 6 and 1 0 to 1. And also I had on the premises a 0 to 1.5, and in the dummy load, which I've got here now, which is only good for 160 meters, a 2.5 amp, and I've looked after that one very carefully too. But as I say, you've just got to forget to switch the transmitter in or something will happen like that, and bang, goodbye meter. Now, where are we? Thanks for the report. Max Howden has been fixed up. Okay, about the Durell tubing too, Jack, if you're listening. 21 feet of hard-drawn aluminium tubing. Yes, well, I've got 18 feet here supporting the antenna partly, and it's only resting up against the end of the house here, and I've got the little helical whip mounted on that too, just to boost the signal on 160, but that's as far as it goes. And the rest of the antenna just goes up over the roof and goes down onto a fairly large insulator, huge insulator on the side of the house, where then goes into the window under the eaves and meets the transmitter, or goes onto the antenna tuning unit, I should say. And that's the only thing we use for power now. Just looking at the RF ammeter, well, it is an RF ammeter, I suppose, but it doesn't have the thermocouple. Now, I'm just trying to sort these notes out. Water car, oh yeah, and the hooligans, oh yes, we won't talk about that anymore, but I had my wife upset. She does all the driving now, and she was very keen on getting to the police station and reporting it, because they were very, very abusive people, as they usually are when there's a can or two about, and you could hear them throwing these cans around, and I thought, well, even if they don't do anything desperate, they might smack a can into the car or something like that, and well, no car's made for that. And also we were just going down the road after we decided to turn tail and move off, and this lout was walking along, and abusive language on him. So I thought, well, it's best not to tangle with these people, because they can be very, very dangerous. So we just simply turned around and went back largely where we came from, the card night. And I've never seen so many cars in all my life. We were trying to turn out of one of the little streets here, and there was just a string of cars, not connected with the same group, but connected with some party or something, and they were just coming past one after the other all the time. And you could tell the way they were driving that things weren't the best, so we thought, well, we better not argue with them. Just stay here until the coast is clear. It was a very frightening night, I can tell you. And then finally when we got home, we didn't see anyone around, so we carefully sneaked in and sat in the car for quite some time, no lights on or anything, and then that was that. So I didn't like to tangle with those. Being nearly 80 years of age, I wouldn't have a hope. Yes, moisture in soil. Okay about the further talk on that, Brian, and with wet newspapers and so forth. And yes, about your garden plot. Well, you can beat me as far as garden plot. My garden completely overgrown with weeds and everything now, but I've managed to get some of the gardening done, but there's still a lot to do. But the gardening plot doesn't exist as far as I'm concerned. but we're getting there. And okay, about the other crystal too, the 1843. I think I've got a crystal around about that we used to use as the alternate crystal on 160, because this crystal that I got from Max Howden, that must be about nearly over 30 years old, I think, and it's made a little holder, and I pull it out occasionally and just clean it. And I don't know how much it cost me. It doesn't cost very much, but in those days, of course, finances weren't quite as bad as they are now. AR magazine hasn't arrived here yet. I'll have a look in the letterbox when I'm finished this and see if there's anything doing. But you can understand the reason why they're a bit late now, because practically everyone's on holidays or something. And about Citizen Kane, Brian, I'm not quite sure about that. It's interesting to... we did see the film when it came out, Citizen Kane, and that was quite good. I always remember that zither. And we'll keep an eye on it to see what comes on TV. I think you said sometime this week. Okay, about the 50-foot mast and the old catalogue from Homecrafts. Yes, well, they were quite the order of the day, weren't they? In fact, that's about the only place you'd get radio parts from was the old Chandler's. I remember buying many things from there, and A.J. Veal was another one. I don't think they're in existence now. The Homecrafts are all right. I think they're combined with Chandler's, because I remember buying a battery from them a few years ago, a little 9-volt cell, because the other stores that had them had run out of stock. And I remember calling it at Chandler's and picking this battery up, and there it was. And okay, Herb, about the SMA license renewal. Yes, well, $50 was the last touch, and I don't think it'll change very much from then. It was $51 the year before, and it's been dropped down $1. But we hope that's as far as it goes. Upwards, I mean. I don't think there's very much more now, and I think I've covered everything, so I'll put it over to Brian, who'll be now next in line, and leave you carry on there, Brian. So VK3WYN and the group, this is VK3AP.
VK3AP and VK3JO, VK3WYN returning. Yes, fine there, Al and Herb, and the points noted there. And, just on the films, Al, the Zither, you mentioned the Zither, that's The Third Man. That's the other notable film in which Orson Welles was one of the stars. Orson Welles and Joseph Cotton. And of course, those two played the lead roles in the earlier movie, the Citizen Kane movie, which is being rebroadcast this week. You'll probably see it in the programs there. But I've always rather liked Orson Welles in his acting roles, quite ahead of his time, which of course got him into strife there with different people. But he had a lot of good concepts, I think, with the presentation of the movies there, both in black and white, of course, and very interesting. Now, here we are. Here's a page from 1930-something. The Australasian Radio World. Veal's Radio and Electrical Stores, Al. Buy your Recepticon aerial wire. There we are. Recepticon, they call it. And it does all sorts of marvellous things there. Improves reception and makes you hear stations you've never heard before. And for some price there in shillings and pence, of course. And I also came across one of the old Homecrafts catalogues about the same era, or a page from it. And I'd be interested to know there, Herb, this is back before I was on the planet, Herb and Al, 1935. Just wondered what would have been the basic wage then for an average working man, because they, just comparing with the price of bits and pieces here in the catalogues, and they give a price for here we are, the latest Radio Oaks dual wave kit set. Now it's a kit set, not even made up. £12.19 sixpence. So I would imagine that would have been quite a few weeks' wages back in those days. So if any recollections there of what the going rate would have been there in the pay packet, might be interesting. I'll have a look for Bob VK3EL there, Herb, for that, if I've got any earlier home crafts paperwork. The earliest magazine I could find at a quick glance is, this is 1924, the Wireless World and Radio Review, The Enormous Sum of Fourpence. Now I think that's a UK production, that one. I'm just having a quick look to find the advertisements. Yes, here we are. Give your wireless friends these for Christmas. And there's all sorts of devices there, which I've seen around the place. Yeah, that's an English magazine. I think it's about the earliest one I've got. What have they got? Wireless valve transmitters. There we are. Just a book cost you 9 shillings back in 1924. So interesting, the prices. Let's see, Herb, note the further comments there, and very interested in how Joe's going, seeing what you mentioned there a while back. So sounds like whatever it was is all behind him there. Certainly hope so. No doubt there'd be, to do with the reorganisation of his affairs there, I guess, would have an impact on anybody. So perhaps that's coming to terms with that. And very handy that he can give you assistance there, Herb, with the accurate test equipment. Yes, note the problem there, lugging all that gear in, especially if you've got to go up up in floors and lifts and whatnot. So that was just a suggestion there, Herb, if you wanted something that would give you an accurate indication. But I suppose if you're taking the AR7 and you get that aligned, you can use that as an accurate receiving set from then on. I've got an idea that once they're aligned properly, they don't drift very much. So that might be a good frequency standard for you, Herb, once the AR7 is spot on. So it'll be quite handy. And Al, yes, just to round off there, note your comments about the garden. And yes, we'll I'll try and keep this to a minimum maintenance garden here. I certainly don't water the lawns or anything. In fact, something I've noticed the last couple of years, since everybody is now paying for water according to how many litres or gallons they use, a lot of the gardens have just dried up. Lawns that used to be a deep green through summertime, even in just the surrounding streets here, they've all turned brown, the same as my one has. So I think people are probably feeling the pinch, because it's surprising the quantity of water that used to go through those sprinklers if they were left on day and night. So I guess, unless you're very wealthy, I guess that's a thing of the past there. Okay there, that's been good. No further news from here. And I'll look forward to receiving my next phone call from different places regarding this interference. But at least we seem to be on the right track. The interference is recognised now by both of the cable TV companies as existing, and they've had further reports as well as mine, and have started investigations already. So hope that'll all be sorted out, and we'll keep you posted on what we find is the actual problem there in due course. I'll make this a final, and I'll listen for, let's see, Herb. Either you or Al might like to tie up the proverbial ribbon. VK3JO and VK3AP, VK3WYN signing.
Yes, righto there, Brian, VK3 AP, VK3WYN, VK3JO replying. Yes, copied okay, of course, and there are one or two things that I'd overlooked on my last transmission there, but I'm not sure whether I can think of them now. Anyway, look, with the AR7 and the stability of it, it just makes you wonder. One of the procedures for aligning mentions setting the RF gain control to a certain figure. I think it says from memory position 6 on the dial, and that's the position one uses for going through the alignment process. Another one mentions turning that same RF gain control fully maximum, so that you've got maximum RF gain before doing the alignment. The reason being that anything less than that, or when the signals come along and you get the AVC applied to the circuits of the various valves, it gives an alteration in the alignment. You can have a different alignment for different grid voltages. It's just the effect of the input, or the valve input on the tuned circuit. So I mean, if you've got a case like that where you've got the AVC voltage upsets the tuning of the alignment there, that to my mind doesn't make for maximum stability in the thing. The other query there about the comparative costs, or comparing costs with wages at that time, I would think that an average wage would be between £4 and £5 per week. I think when I started getting full money, it's probably about £4.12 or something like that. So you know, it's totally different. With regard to the Homecrafts catalogue, Alan Doble is proposing to inquire at the Moorabbin gathering tomorrow morning to see whether he can get something like that for Bob. So that's just another angle. With regard to that, I don't know that particular book magazine that you mentioned at all, but you thought it was an English publication. There used to be a publication called Sea, Land and Air. I had seen some of those, but of course that was in the very early days, and I think they're probably more for commercial operators, because, you know, at that stage radio was used mainly for marine purposes, rather than you know, there's no general broadcasting or anything like that. So I think from memory it you know, would keep tabs on the ships operators and all, and the commercial, the coastal radio stations and that sort of thing. So there are possibly some of those about somewhere. I think there was some suggestion too, with reference to that Homecrafts book, about the library may have some copy, but apparently that angle had been investigated without result. So that was that. Now some of the thought crossed my mind there, but you know, it's just gone again. I can't remember what it was. TV programs, didn't watch anything beyond the heartbeat, so didn't see anything of that. Watering, yes, I too have not been doing as much watering as we used to do. Certain things appear to be suffering, but I think they'll recoup themselves. I did go for a walk yesterday morning, and one place I passed, when I say yesterday morning, I think it was between 7 and 8 hours, and one place I passed had the sprinkler hoses going flat out on a new patch of grass. Hadn't started showing through yet, and just made me wonder at that hour whether they'd been out and turned them on, or whether they'd left them on all night. I have seen some people using hoses, sort of thing that I wouldn't do. But I certainly haven't been watering very much at all. It's just the veggies I try to keep going. A few tomatoes coming on, the plants really. Oh, one or two of them got fruit on them. And silver beet, I like to keep that going, and that's a good green veggie. So there we be. Right. Is there anything else? I've made a few scribbles there. Noted your further comments there about those vandals and louts that were making nuisances of themselves, and it's certainly very disturbing to that sort of thing. Best thing you can do is to get out of their way. I think that's about all you can do. Okay, cheers. Once again, all the best, and see you later. I better get some lunch. VK3JO concluding, listening before closing. Cheers.
Yes, thanks, Herb. VK3AP. And the only comment I have, Herb, is about these vandals. There was a party nearby in the street just around the corner, and judging by the number of cars were parked there, they were everywhere, and they get quite bad mischievous too when they're in a group like that. Everyone wants to show them what a brave person they are and what they can do, and we got out for our lives. I know it was that time of the year when this sort of thing happens, but we didn't take any risks, any chances. And fortunately, when we came back, they'd all dispersed. So that was that. Well, I don't think there's anything else now on this over. I'd like to thank you very much for me making a later entry. I'm not sure about tomorrow. I think there's a bit of shopping to be done, so we'll try our best and we'll try and get on. If not, well, you'll all understand. So with those few remarks, I'll sign on this over, and thank you very much for the comments and so forth. So VK3AP is now signing clear with the group and saying cheers. Cheers, everyone.
73L and 73 Herb. VK3WYN clear.